Today, our panelists will deep dive into how other destinations globally have reshaped their tourism offering with a focus on more authentic experiences and what results they have achieved for the entire industry. We have listeners registered today from small operators, regional associations, probably the broadest audience of our webinars thus far. So the topic is very relevant to small and medium-sized businesses as well as larger tourism operators. Welcome to all of you who tuned in. We will also get valuable insights from a tourism business here in Sri Lanka, which lives and breathes in offering uniquely Sri Lankan experiences to guests for the past 8 years. Post-COVID, we need to use this difficult moment to refine what we are offering our international guests. And some simple tips will be shared by the panelists today on how we can all do this. So without further ado, I'd like to quickly introduce our panelists. Andrew Fairley, former Deputy Chair, Tourism Australia, I beg your pardon. He is no stranger to Sri Lanka. He's been here many, many times and has been helping in various shapes and form. Andrew has a distinguished association with ecotourism, conservation, parks and resort management over many years. In addition to his role with Tourism Australia, he was previously chair of Parks Victoria and Zoos Victoria. Then Oliver Martin, partner 2031 Consulting out of Canada. He is a destination development specialist and expert in the design of research to identify innovations in destination and brand strategy. Oliver has worked with over 50 tourism boards around the world to develop sustainable growth plans and measure impact. Then our own Dilsiri Valikala, owner Kitesurfing Sri Lanka. Many of you may know him. Dilsiri is passionate about sustainable tourism and how it can be used as a tool to transform society for the better. I'm really looking forward to hearing how he runs his business, which really is a case study for us all. And last but not least, Catherine Droga, moderator, global tourism expert and advisor to the Alliance. Catherine specializes in destination and tourism business resilience strategies, marketing and events. A big shout out to Australia. 2 of the 3 panelists today are from Australia, and that country has been very helpful to Sri Lanka tourism over the years. So it's a magnificent show of support for Sri Lanka tourism. Thank you, Australia. Please post questions on Zoom, as you generally do, via the Q&A icon and on the Facebook chat, and we'll answer as many of them as we can, and those that we can't, we'll do so in follow-up communication. So sorry, I spoke for a bit longer than usual. Over to Catherine and the eminent panel.
Thank you so much, Malik, and welcome everybody. For those of our listeners, we've got a really great group of panelists here. Thank you so much for joining me. And our focus today, as Malik mentioned, is really we're going to kind of unpick what the experience economy means and how does that drive a high value opportunity for individual businesses as well as Sri Lanka tourism overall. So our theme of how we're going to do today, and I encourage you that if you haven't been able to get onto the Zoom, we are streaming live on our Facebook site as well for anyone that's interested to join. And please post questions as we go and we'll do those at the end. So our focus really is to go macro and understand this concept of experience economy and high value traveler, etc. Then we're going to move through what that means from a business perspective, a destination perspective. How does it look post COVID when travel resumes? And we're going to look at some best practice insights. So let's start kicking off with Andrew. Welcome. And my first question for you, Andrew, is, let's talk a bit about definitions. So many people talk to us about, we say, what does the high value traveler mean? Immediately people think we're talking about luxury, which is completely incorrect. Can you take us through, what it is meant by a high value traveler and what are the benefits for a destination?
Catherine, thank you. And it's terrific to be part of this. And just as Malik has given a big shout out to Australia, I just want to give a big shout out to Malik and to Kamali for the leadership that they show in this alliance. It's been wonderful. I think frequently people do say, well, we're not in the 5-star end of the market, so we're not looking for the high value traveler. That's a complete misconception. High value travelers really, at the end of the day, they're going to stay in your country longer. They're going to probably spend more, and they're attitudinally quite different. They're connected. They've actually done a lot of work before they get there. They know exactly where they're going and what they want to do. They've got a real focus on nature, on sustainability, on authenticity, and they've got a much greater chance of dispersing out into the regions. And that's so incredibly important for Sri Lanka, to get people up to the north, over to the east, not just sticking around the south and the beaches and so on. So we must ensure that we see a high value traveller through a prism that's actually a much broader prism than just wanting to stay in a 5-star resort. We in Australia have really sought to go after the high value traveller, and we came upon that idea really, instead of just selling the destination, we did a lot of research over the last 20 years, or particularly since 2010, I guess, and we ascertained what people's expectations were and why they were intending to travel to this country. And when the people said, well, we're coming because of nature and wildlife, or we're coming because of the food and wine, or the various other alternatives, we said, well, why would we not want to actually go and pursue and market to those specific areas of experiences? Those are the areas that are going to attract people most. They're not interested. I mean, they know that we've got wonderful nature and wildlife, but let's talk about what that means to be up against the rail looking at 50 kangaroos or a Tasmanian devil. Let's bring to life the 12 apostles as you stand on the edge of that platform and look out at the raging sea. Let's actually ensure that people fully understand what that experience is about. And that's the way Tourism Australia has really decided that it's going to build its pillars. And over the last 5 or 6 years, Catherine, as you've been part of in your work at Tourism Australia, it has built this extraordinary collection of pillars that have enabled it to be seen by the world as a place that's experiential, and so it automatically attracts that high value traveller.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. And I think those benefits you talked about just then is that length of stay extension that comes from it, you know, a greater spend per day in terms of multiple experiences. It really starts to build it. So Oliver, in terms of your experience in this space, can you give us your thoughts on the high value traveller and what do we mean by experiences?
Sure, thanks, Catherine. So Andrew, further down in my bio, it says that I headed up the research department at Destination Canada. So we did the exact same research 15 years ago. We were forced to. We were a destination that was strictly marketed on assets, mountains, our Mounties, and moose. And that's how we marketed our destination. And, you know, through going through the shock of 9/11 and then going through the shock of the 2003 SARS crisis really forced us to take an introspective look at our destination and realize the consumer that we were chasing, which was that material consumption-based traveler. And I would really kind of associate that with more of the mass market. That was not the type of traveler that would return in an environment of uncertainty, when safety and security issues were paramount, when the economy was in the tank and available resources to travel were not there. So we had to pivot to that traveler. And the million-dollar question we were trying to answer was, why do people travel? And you will always have a segment of the population, this material consumption. They're looking for the Eiffel Tower. They're looking for the Great Barrier Reef dive. They're looking for the hiking experience in Sigiriya, and they will always exist. The difference to the experiential traveler is that, like you said it, Andrew, it's shifting from material consumption to emotional consumption. And it's not necessarily the hike or the asset that they're trying to achieve. It's what is that feeling that they're getting at that emotional level. And if you can connect with that as a destination, you're able to attract that experiential traveler. This is the traveler that is looking for an immersive experience within the destination. It's not necessarily walking around the market in Colombo, but it's finding that one restaurant that they've read about it in this obscure lifestyle magazine back in Sydney, Australia, or Toronto, Canada. And it's having that feeling of being in this area where the chef is cooking with this type of spice that you can only get in Sri Lanka. And these are the types of travelers that we believe, based on our research, will come back to destinations sooner than that material consumption-based traveler in this post-COVID environment that we're existing in. So Catherine, I'm not sure if I've fully answered your question, but you know, I'm fully agreeing with what Andrew is saying, that experiential traveler is really the type of traveler that is driven by that emotional need to travel and that level of emotional connection with the destination.
Awesome. And I think those two things are a really nice kind of framework around material travel, you know, ticking off sites and looking at things versus experiencing things and creating an emotional connection. And I think that's an awesome segue into Mr. Experience himself here, Dill on the ground, to tell us what you've been doing so that we hear kind of how does that work for you at the moment. Tell us a bit. You've been in operation for 8 years, correct?
Correct.
I'd be really keen to understand your experience offering. So what is it that you're offering for people? And, you know, tell us a bit about the markets that you're attracting or what sort of, you know, length of stays, those sorts of things.
Yes, hi, thanks for the invite. My company, Kitesurf in Lanka, is, we started off as a kitesurfing school where we offered people the ability to learn the sport. And slowly in the second year, we actually expanded also into accommodation. And in the last 8 years, from a 20-bed capacity operation, we've grown to 80 beds in Kalpitia, and we've opened to another 60 beds on the Adams Bridge in Mannar, which are very, very remote locations. We've been able to put Sri Lanka on the map for the sport of kite surfing. In fact, the world's best kite surfers do come to Sri Lanka to learn. And these are very remote, untouched locations, you know, and the travel books even to date, they don't even mention Kalpitia and Mannar as these, you know, kite surfing places. You just say there's a bit of hotels here or there, or there's just a bit of experiences. So we've been able to create a scene, a new market for Sri Lanka in both Kalpitia and Mannar. And the people who come to us are from all over the world. They're not budget travelers. Kite surfers are very different to the surfers. They are business owners, they are middle income or even high income earners. And they usually spend roughly about $100 to $200 a night on accommodation. And then there's the plus, you know, with the rentals and the activities you have to add on. And they would stay with us for roughly 7 days to as long as 3 months. So it is a really cool market. You really get to know them very well in a personal level. We have people who've come into us every year for the last 8 years and stay in a month with us. If you go online on our Facebook, you will see some of our guests crying and saying, you know, we really want to come and get your airport open soon. And, you know, there's a lot of people dying to come to us. So we've really created an amazing product. But more than the product, it's also an amazing community that we've been able to create. And it has grown, you know, and it is growing to this date.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. We've got lots of questions to ask you more, Dill. That's just the beginning. But I think one of the things that you touched on there that I think we might delve a little bit deeper on for all of you is, you know, experiences are we thinking about the international market and what they're looking for, or are we thinking about the destination and what is unique about it, and how does that work together? I might throw to Oliver first on that, and then I'm going to go to Andrew, just the thoughts of how that works.
So Catherine, this is the argument of, you know, supply versus demand, and getting our supply right as the destination, and then ensuring that we're matching it to the demand. I think I'll take a step up from a brand perspective. Branding is a very loaded concept in our business, and especially from a destination perspective. We tend to present our brands in terms of we as the destination interpret it, and it becomes a very political process, right? Political folks get in the mix, business comes into the mix, and we tend to project out what we want consumers to consume from our destinations. When we turn that around and we take a look at what the consumer wants, to Andrew's point, why are they traveling? What do they want to consume and experience when they travel? And when we can align our destination brands to that consumer appeal, that a consumer emotional connectivity, then I think we're more successful as destinations. I know Sri Lanka has recently gone through a branding exercise, and it's an awesome brand. Unfortunately, it was just launched right after the terrorist attacks last year. The great thing is, in this environment right now, we've kind of been reset. COVID has literally reset the industry. And the opportunity we have for Sri Lanka is to take a critical look at our brand and our brand positioning and see how we want to match that effectively to this type of experiential or intrepid traveler that we know exists and we know is willing to travel in this post-COVID environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for that, Oliver. Andrew, what's your experience around this, you know, authentic, we're talking about authentic experiences. It's coming up a lot here in terms of, you know, emotionally connecting and authentic experiences, and then our international markets. How has that worked in Australia in terms of some of the projects or work when you were
Well, you know, it's really interesting. As you know, Catherine, I played a role in assisting Sri Lanka to develop its strategy of 2017 to 2020, which went out to 2025. And it spoke about that exact issue of Sri Lanka traditionally just being known as the sun, sand, sea and smiles. It's got its historical and its cultural aspects. It's got its wildlife viewing. And that's the prism through which it's been seen. But the strategy talks so much more, talks about there being so much more to Sri Lanka and to the experiential opportunities that are presented, whether it's Sri Lankan cuisine, whether it's that whole health and well-being, the Ayurvedic, whether it's the scuba and surfing and obviously kite surfing, or whales. And I think that there's a real need to really expand that research focus so that you're not just operating anecdotally as a country. You've actually gone out and you've said to the market, well, what do you want? What is going to be interesting to you? And therefore, how do we market? And if I can just give a couple of examples, Catherine, of what Australia has done, where the research showed that Australia was well known for its food and wine offering, but it was only ranking about 8th or 9th in the world. And so we really started to focus as a country on building that brand recognition of food and wine. And in 2015, I think it was, we launched Restaurant Australia. That is, anywhere in Australia that you go is great food and great wine. Over the period of that 2 years, where we built incredible emotional connectedness, we went from, I think, 7th or 8th recognized country in the world for food and wine up to number 4. And it became a real pillar around which we were able to build extraordinary experiences. The following one we built was Coastal and Aquatic. That is that whole notion of come here because we've got fabulous beaches, we've got great lakes, but there's all the experiences that flow off that. So you're using your natural resource to then build the emotional experience around it. The next one is nature and wildlife. And, you know, there are so many more that Australia can build on and will build on. I retired from the Tourism Australia a couple of years ago, but Indigenous tourism is an incredibly important part of that emotional message. The driving of that special interest tourism. I mean, one of the things that I think Australia has done really well and creates a strong emotional connectedness, Catherine, is what you had an involvement in while you were there. What is the best of golf, the best of fishing, the best of luxury lodges, the best of glamping? And those are the sorts of things where Sri Lanka can achieve that level of international recognition, because it's got so much of the best of what is unique in the world. It's unique cultural sites, that fabulous cultural triangle, Sigiriya, the tea country. It's just an amazing destination waiting to be discovered more by those experiential tourists the high value tourists that we've spoken about.
Catherine, just to
Fantastic.
pick up on that, sorry, Catherine, could I just pick up on what Andrew's saying?
Sure.
Sure. So Andrew, we did that, you know, again, the amount of times that we're copying what Tourism Australia is doing in Canada or vice versa, we did, again, the same sort of research, and we realized that it wasn't these just disparate assets that are throughout the country. What is the commonality amongst them? And it forced us to develop, or it inspired us to develop, our Signature Experiences program. So it was trying to find these, you know, I know that Queensland uses the term hero assets, but it's the same kind of theme there. We tried to look at these signature experiences that we knew we had a competitive advantage in, that we knew were a unique selling proposition for Canada. We doubled down on their development, and we knew if we could drive the consumer to these types of signature experiences assets, it would naturally benefit and almost create this hub for consumers to experience so much around that core asset. And again, Sri Lanka has this. It has all the right ingredients. When I look at Sri Lanka brochures right now, part of me is very excited, but part of me is very confused, because we're trying to be a lot of things to a lot of consumers. I think at its core are specific assets that it does really well at. I think Sri Lanka, in this post-COVID environment, should identify those core assets: culture, the aspects of culture that are linked to heritage, because culture is very, very opaque. Figure out how we can define those core assets, develop them as signature experiences, and then launch them out to the marketplace. And this will benefit Sri Lanka in the long term, right? Sri Lanka will be known as not just the southern neighbor of India, but the core experience in this whole space here.
Right, I agree. And I think that that concept of signature experiences can be delivered on the ground by individual operators as well as a destination. So we're talking at a macro level at the moment, but at the moment there are also, which I think is powerful, to try and umbrella them up into those bits. But I see that it's happening on the ground. The way it happens is through product development. It happens through individual operators doing things that are delivering on this, like Dill is. So Dill, can you take us through the experiences that you offer your guests, just to give us an example of how you've developed experiences that are authentic and a bit quirky, or whatever it is, just that kind of are appealing to the consumer, but also able to be delivered on the ground?
So when we started our business, I have no background in tourism. And it was almost like, we look what others are doing sometimes, but then also we listen to our customers. And from the kite surfing, it went on to the yoga experiences where we ran yoga, and then of course, wellness and massage, and went on to diving. Kalpitia has amazing diving, extended to conservation, where in Kalpitia we have mangrove restoration, and in Mena we've partnered with the University of Colombo on bird research. And it's an ongoing program. And then on the even more quirky side, we even partnered to run Sri Lanka's first pole dance camps, believe it or not. And these are people who come to Sri Lanka. It is like fitness, and they spend 3 weeks in Sri Lanka, and the world champions came, and it's like yoga, but it's an up and coming sport. And the recent one is also beach gym and CrossFit, which we partnered with in Kalpitia. We have a bit of problems even registering these new experiences, even with Tourist Board, because they have no criteria to register. For instance, the CrossFit and the beach gym, when I went to them, they said, oh, there is no category to register these. You can register it as a spa. And we said, no, we cannot. And so we have a bit of problems, trying to develop new products as well, because there is legalities are there also. But these are some of the experiences we've run. And last April, we ran a very a nice festival, music and arts festival in Kalpitia called the Wild Collective. And all of these are to bring people to these locations all year round. So we don't want Kalpitia to be just a kite surfing destination, but we know that it has an amazing dive season. And of course, the beaches are untouched, just like in Mena as well, secluded beaches, beautiful nature. And so we are very emergent in the way we develop our products. We see opportunities and we just sit down and, develop the programs ourselves.
That's amazing. That is such a diverse kind of it. From kite surfing was the kind of passion piece. And you were from the textiles industry originally, weren't you? You weren't even a tourism operator.
Yes, I was in the textile industry, but while working, they realized that I have a passion for this. And so much so that my CEO gave me a break to follow my dreams. So I'm very grateful for that. And I kind of follow the same the ethos, you know, to give our staff the chance, the opportunities to, you know, to use their skills, to talk to guests, to make products and sell. And I think this is the uniqueness of our company and what our guests see, and they continue to come to experience and see.
I love that. So you've actually touched on something that really does quite well as a segue in, which is sustainability. So can we just, you know, experiences and sustainability kind of go hand in hand in terms of helping community, and definition of sustainability, everyone always goes straight to kind of the conservation arm of sustainability, which is fundamental and really a critical part of it. But sustainability is really community and culture and conservation as well as commerce. It's all the C's that come together. So Dil, can you tell us how you're living and breathing that on the ground? Because that is really fascinating.
Yes. So as a business, I think profitability is number one. So you need to get your, you know, your business running very well. Of course, the checks and balances are there. But as with the start of our business, we knew, and I learned a lot of this through the textile experiences where they went into villages and they said that we are the outsiders. So our businesses need to benefit you as much as we benefit. So we came up to these villages, to these communities in Kalpite and Mana, and we said, let's develop a win-win mechanism where we, you know, not take all the services to ourselves. Let's outsource services to you, the transportation, the boat services, the staffing. Let's support your local fishing communities. And slowly we saw interdependence start between our company and the village. So much so that the village really, you know, stood firm for us, you know, when we had issues maybe with local government and etc. And it has benefited us tremendously. In terms of the conservation, again, it is a part and parcel of our ethos. You know, as much as you profit from an area, you must make sure that you do something for the environment. And so we saw that there was a depletion of mangroves in the area. So we started the Mangrove Project, the upcycling of beach waste in Mana, the conservation of the migratory birds, you know, funding the research up there. And a lot of these projects just started off out of our pure passion for the subject. But then the guest suddenly said, hey, you are planting mangroves. Can I come and plant? You know, my children want to plant. And suddenly we let them plant, and then they want to come back the next day and see how the plants are growing. And slowly we created this bond with them. One point I like to mention is that in our business, we also deliberately chose which markets we want to take in. We wanted to be in the middle range. We didn't want to go high end. We didn't want to go low end, because there is enough tourism for everybody. If we go into the low end, the local village will not be able to have their little homestays or little guest houses where they cater to the small market. So we deliberately went on that line as well. And a nice example I can give is the local fisherman, the president of the Fishing Society, Sugat, starting off as a fisherman 8 years ago. He has now come up to have his own little guest house through these systems that we've put in place. And his kids are kite surfing, and we've been able to transform the trajectory of a village. And I think it's very important for Sri Lanka in terms of even the high-end hotels, the boutique hotels. You know, when you price, think about the others as well. You know, if you slash your prices, you will put out business to the guest houses. You know, there is enough to go around. But if you're not able to attract your market, you know, don't kill the small guys. And this is something that we've seen even in the recent, you know, in this phase one of opening it. We feel that it's benefiting only a certain segment, and it is very unfair for the small operators, let alone the operators that even don't have the Sri Lanka tourism, you know, their certifications, because it is the smaller players that really put into the scene, you know, these locations. You talk about Hikkadua, you talk about Hirikatia, you go down to Arugambe, Trincomalee, Kalpite, Mana, you know, all these places, they started off with the small guys, the entrepreneurs who went there, who braved, all the elements, and they started their business, and suddenly the bigger chains followed. And it's very unfair that the chains now want to take, the credit or the business that's coming in.
And I think it's an interesting one that you raise also, that, what visitors are looking for is so diverse, but the thing that they're drawn to is authentic experiences and connections to local community and culture. So, that is how we need the whole industry to thrive. Andrew, can I just throw to you a little bit around your learnings? You've done a lot in the space of sustainability in the South Pacific, as well as in Australia, Fiji and Australia. Can you give us some insight into this?
I was fascinated by Dill's reflections on what they're doing. When we founded Turtle Island in the 80s, which is nearly 40 years old this year, we operated through the prism of a quadruple bottom line. So everything you did had to have environmental integrity, it had to have financial sense, it had to benefit the local people, and it had to celebrate the heritage and culture of place. And if you do what Dill's doing, and if you do what we did in the Yasawas in Fiji, then you build strength and capacity around that community in a way that they just simply have got no hope of being able to do it otherwise. But the key is to be able to do it within the cultural norms and to retain those strong, and in Fiji's case, patriarchal and hopefully now matriarchal culture that is such a strong underpinning to build and to maintain that capacity. And it's so important. And whether it's cultural sustainability, whether it's environmental sustainability, financial sustainability is absolutely critical. But sustainability also of the people who work for you, and the sustainability to be able to give them a life that they would want to aspire to, and the sustainability of your guest model. And we have done that, I think, quite successfully at Turtle Island by when people come, they're actually offered to come back at some time in the future, and they get a modest discount. And so many, probably 30–40% of the people who come to the island will buy what we call a return plan, because they know then that they own a little part of the South Pacific that's going to draw them back. And that's hugely important. That's hugely important for them to get that emotional sense that there's a little part of them still available to go and have another week in the middle of the South Pacific.
Thanks, Andrew. And I'm going to throw to Oliver, but one of the comments that Dill said to me before was, when we were chatting ahead of this, was he said, sustainability makes good business sense. I found that a really interesting statement. What did you mean by that, Dill, in terms of that space? Because you're not doing it because you're doing it for multiple reasons. Tell me your reasons of why you do it.
It was only in retrospect that this, this thought came to me, I think with the returning guest, with the, who also mentioned the reason I come to you year after year, the reason I will choose you over the hotel next door, which is much better than your hotel in terms of facilities, is because I see that you are doing something for this community, for the environment. And this is, we are not the most fancy hotel. We are a bit more expensive, but we're not the most fancy, but they see the work we do, they see the legacy we have in this village, and I think they honor us for this. And it is the same with the village, whether we are building the schools or helping in fundraisers, or we form partnerships to commit to become sustainable cities by taking our mayor to Berlin and, forming a partnership. I think in the long term, they respect and they honor your commitment that you have for your guests, for the environment, and for the local community. And this is why I said that sustainability really, makes good business sense.
Thanks, Dill. Oliver, have you got any thoughts around your experience in this space of sustainability and experiences, and how in a post-COVID environment, what does that look like?
Yeah, so Catherine, this experiential traveler, this traveler that is motivated for experiencing at a very emotional level a destination, they happen to align to the aspirational segmentation my former firm Globescan launched. These are the types of consumers that want to know they're staying in a hotel that is paying their staff a living wage. They want to know that the value chain of the assets that are brought into the hotel, be it the food products or whatnot, are sourced within a 100-kilometer radius from local farms. Nobody wants to travel to a destination knowing that they're going to have a detrimental effect on that destination. I think that side of the business will exist, but I think longer term, that side of the business, and COVID has really proven it, is completely unsustainable. These are the travelers that will not return back to destinations, and they will not return any sort of commitment back to the destination. This is why destinations like Amsterdam and Venice, destinations that have been overburdened by the bad side of tourism, are dramatically trying to turn their tourism model around. The benefit with Sri Lanka is that you've always flirted with sustainability to some aspect of your destination in terms of your destination experience. And this is why, assets like Jetwing exist. And this is why, the research that we do for a number of these Middle Eastern destinations, Sri Lanka tends to over-index on being that destination that is valuing its commitment to environmental, cultural preservation. And it is looked at as one of those aspirational destinations. Flipping it back to the Sri Lanka context, I think you undervalue your tourism experience. It is a natural impetus in our business when you're presented with crisis to decrease your prices to try and drive back tourism. And that's important, right? Because we need to ensure that we're getting dollars back into Sri Lanka. But I think longer term, we have to ensure that we are valuing and pricing Sri Lanka for the value that it is providing back to the tourism experience. And when we, the analysis that we've conducted, and mostly from a competitive perspective, Sri Lanka is under indexing by about 15% versus its peers, which means that we are automatically lowering the kind of consumer that we're bringing into the destination. And we don't necessarily want these low-end charters. Let Goa and Phuket take them. We want to have the type of consumer that is exactly the type of consumer that Dale is targeting, that they're willing to go into the village, buy local goods, they're willing to spend a little bit extra to stay in the destination, knowing that they're getting that experience, and that they're valuing Sri Lanka for everything that it is. They're not just trying to choose any sand beach destination, that sun, sea, and surf destination. Let them go to other places.
That's a really good point. And I think that space around, if we kind of narrow down into now in terms of this post-COVID world when travel is starting to resume, it's obviously kicking back from a domestic perspective, but our international markets, which are so critical for Sri Lanka, as we go ahead, I'd love to ask you all some questions around those markets and opportunities. So Dil, can you tell me a little bit about who are your markets in terms of who are your customers? So which markets are really looking at that experiential tourism space, and how are you doing? This is a really important question, and I'm sorry I didn't ask it at the beginning. How are you doing in terms of the COVID situation and the recovery, and how you're coping?
Yes, first of all, my business partner is French, so our main market is Europe itself, with France, Switzerland, Germany, Austria. And as of late, also, we've got the Australia, the expatriates in the UAE, Hong Kong, Singapore, and also the Eastern European countries as well that come. So we've got a really wide range of clients that come to us. And your second question was on COVID and how we.
Yeah, how are you doing? Like, what's going on, and how are you coping with no visitors and a community that relies on tourism? Like, what's the strategy, and how do you give advice to others who are in this situation of what's going on?
So we must understand that we got a double hit, because it was our peak season last year when the bombings happened, and again this year when the country was on lockdown. So we got a double hit, and in early March we knew that it's going to hit us. So we knew we had to freeze all construction, and we also told the staff, we know it's going to hit to us, and we're not going to get the guest. So if you're not from this village, go home. We will continue to pay your salary, not the full salary. We cannot afford it. The reason why we said we couldn't afford it, because we ascertained that we have only around 3 months of funds left or reserves to pay our staff. If we pay them full salary, we can only last 3 months. So we told them, guys, this is how much money we have. And this is the, the cut we're going to take, all of us. And you don't have to come to work. We will manage with the skeleton staff. We said, if the money runs out, even after the 3 months, we will look into more extreme measures, whereas maybe I sell my vehicle, we might get rid of some assets just to pay you your salaries because you are valuable to us. We appealed to our clients, our guests on social media. I think if you all go onto our social media and if you go through the timeline, you will see there were times that for me personally, was a really tough challenges also, but we reached out to our client base, and in 3 weeks, we collected almost, we collected around 30,000 euros on a campaign, online campaign, and another guest, a family, gave us almost 50,000 euros, and they said, cover your bank loans, just be stable, and you can pay us back in 2 years at maybe almost no interest. And, so 80,000 euros in like 3 weeks was crazy. And this is what blew me away. And this is when I realized, wow, we have created something that is beyond myself and my partner, Leo. Our guests themselves believe in us, and they feel that this business must go on because they are part and parcel of this business. So to those who run small businesses, you have more than the high-end businesses, the smaller businesses, you have an ideal opportunity to really build those bonds with your guest, the long-term bonds, and they will support you if you are honest, if you are genuine in your efforts. I guess now, in retrospect, after COVID, I would say invest in your customers, your clients who come to you, and also get them involved with the community around you, because they value that and they will go with you on the long term.
That's amazing. So it's that money that you've raised has been earmarked for staff wages and salaries and operational expense. Is that what you GoFundMe for?
Yes. So basically it's for the staff to pay them as long as we can. We predicted that the industry will be down till about December. We've had a few blessings coming our way, that we had some guests who came to us, they braved the curfew and they came to us. So we have some blessings. So we are very grateful for that. But in general, the money is for our staff. If tourism picks up by August and we have this excess money, we just give it to them, because we value them, because all our staff have been with us for over 8 years, from the beginning. We don't have a high, people don't leave us. And so they also feel part and parcel of the business. We also are changing our business model slightly to partnerships, where we are giving opportunities for our staff to partner in our businesses. For instance, in our repair shop, though we invested and we started the business for the repair of kites, we said, the guy who is handling it, we said, you are now 50% partner with us, because we've earned our money, in the sense, it is, how much money do you want to earn through tourism? If you're comfortable, that is, if we start to be greedy and try to amass all the wealth for ourselves, this is the problem that we see around the world. The rich want to get richer, but instead of that, be satisfied with what you have, and why not share the resources with your staff and the community and help them also be uplifted, let them get, get value through this business. And I think it's working so far, and we are really, really stoked at, how it has been very emergent, but we've seen a really amazing model emerge from this.
Wow, thank you for that. Oliver, that's kind of quite remarkable. And I think, Dil, when you tell that story, it really gives us all a reality check of connection to your clients and your customers, but more importantly, connection to community. And so that if you build a business that's truly integrated with both, there's a real opportunity. Oliver, I've just lost you. Are you coming back? Because I was about to ask you a question.
I'm here. Sorry, it's also wake up time right now for my 8-year-old, so I'm trying to politely tell him to leave. His Lego is in the living room.
It's okay. It's called the world we're living in. So do you want me to go to someone else for a minute, or should I ask you?
I'm good now. I'm good.
Okay, good.
The camera was off, so you didn't see me like shooing him away.
Okay, that's all right. That's good. I just wanted to check from your perspective, post-COVID, you know, for our listeners today, you know, markets. Can we talk about markets? We're going to get to domestic in a minute as well, but, you know, from an experiences perspective, you know, what markets are opportunities for this return, and, you know, which ones? I know it's difficult to know, but I really appreciate your input.
So Catherine, I have my slide. If you give me, if you allow me to share my screen, I can just show it to you, and all the viewers can watch it on what I show here. I think you just need to give me permission.
Okay. So hold on, I'm looking for my permission to do that. I might actually share it myself if that's all right. How about we do it that way?
Yeah, sure. It's just the second file I sent you this morning. Sorry, to Dill's point, so this is awesome. You know, 40 years ago when American Airlines realized the cost of acquisition of a consumer was a lot more than just, you know, talking with your existing consumers. They, you know, they created the Admirals Club, right? A loyalty program. Dill's example has taken it so much further. It's creating that concept of shared value with your consumer. Consumers, and especially consumers that are willing to think, I need to get on a plane, I need to spend a lot of money, and I need to fly long haul to a destination. They want so much more than that sun, surf, and sand. And what Dill's providing to them is that it's that sense of, and again, you know, consumers are very selfish, right? Dill is providing them an opportunity for them to feel good. And if we can do that more as destinations, I think we're able to then attract that experiential or that aspirational type of consumer.
It's this concept of transformational travel. So transformational travel really links in with this experience is that you go to a destination and you connect with, you know, whether it's nature or local communities and stuff, to evolve, and you return a changed person. The experiences you have on the journey change you for the better. And I think that's the sort of bigger picture that's happening. I found your slide.
Perfect.
Okay, I probably haven't enlarged it appropriately, but there you go. People can see it now.
Sure. So for all the folks that are listening, so this is based on hard quantitative data. We've done a big, massive piece of consumer research in the last 2 months, and really looked at, you know, demographics, psychographics, and the whole social values that define what we would call an intrepid traveler. We know they exist in these 15 markets. We know a whole chunk of the markets that Sri Lanka has traditionally looked at. A lot of these Eastern European markets, we know they're going to have a hard time coming back. These are economies that are, you know, just decimated by COVID, and the discretionary income for those travelers will not be there for the next 3 or 4 years. The benefit of some of these longer haul markets is they have much larger populations. And by default, the intrepid traveler, roughly around 1/3 of the traveling population, still exist. And so we know they will come back to these, you know, 2 destinations, as long as they're you know, they're enticed and they're motivated to travel. Catherine, unfortunately, with 190 countries around the world now in recovery mode, there is going to be severe competition, extensive competition in these same markets. And so what Sri Lanka needs to do at, you know, at a national level and at a regional level and a tourism asset level is really take a critical look at what markets they want to be in and ensure that they have the frequency, the right message, and, you know, the critical ad buy to try and target these consumers. The great thing is, in this environment with digital media, it's a lot cheaper to be in market. I will say, though, that marketing will not save us in this industry. Catherine, you mentioned it before about product development. I think if we can take a good hard look at our products and experiences that we're trying to develop for Sri Lanka and ensure that we're matching them with consumers, I think we'll be able to spend our dollars better than, you know, if we were to just launch a marketing campaign.
Exactly. And I think
the easiest guest to get, Oliver, is the one who's been there before. And
exactly.
if I was running a small operation, an SME in Sri Lanka right now, I would be spending a lot of my time re-engaging with those guests who you knew really got it. I'd be trying to find ways for them to come and support you. I think Dill did an amazing job in being able to get his guests to actually get him to pay the staff. What we have done in Fiji is we've gone out to all our guests and said, we're fine, we can survive, but all of those poor people in the village that don't any longer have jobs either in town in the mainland of Fiji or in the other areas, the other backpacker places around us. They're all struggling. Could you, and we did a GoFundMe and raised over 25,000 US, which we then just distributed to all of the villages so that they could plant their talo and their daro and their vegetables so that they could grow and they could get new boats to go fishing.
Something that, when we talk about getting our guests back, and this is a big problem that the small and medium enterprises have at the moment. Our guests want to come back, but there is a barrier that's been created, which is for us, it's unfair competition. I hope they will reconsider and change this statement that they put, because for us, our guests are willing to spend. We have already invested in PPE, and it is very unfair if our guests, with all of us, spending money on PPE, for them to not be given the chance equally to come to Sri Lanka.
Great, thank you for that. Dil, one more question for you in terms of that space. What tools have you found that have been most successful for you to promote your experiences? What's the learnings that you've got that has worked? Andrew mentioned a great one about, your previous guests. Is that the same for you? Or how do you generate of having no budget to do marketing, but needing to engage?
We do have a budget for marketing as well. Social media is the key at the moment. So we are on all platforms. If you go on our Vimeo page, we are shooting videos all the time, keeping guests updated. We had a message in March. I put a message out to Europe saying, we are with you because we feel that Corona is going to hit you hard. And then suddenly it hit us also. But we kept communicating. I think the key is to communicate with your guest. But also, once they visit you, show gratitude and thank them for what they do and help them understand what they do does make a difference. So very recently, I started sending some personal letters to the guests who came during Corona and thanked them for what they did and told them and showed them how their money spent, made an impact to people's lives. So it's very important to keep that bond with your guest.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that. Oliver.
Catherine, sorry, I just realized there's a few questions coming in around the domestic market.
We're going to do that in a minute.
We're going to do that?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to do all the questions coming in.
Great.
Oh, did you have something on that one? No.
Oh,
Andrew?
Sorry, I just want to make a couple of comments about perhaps the way in which government and tourism authorities might use this time, Catherine, to actually prepare till the ground for when this all comes back.
That's a great one, because I think that would be a really good piece to talk about, and then we'll switch it out to question time from the audience.
One of them, we talked about sustainability, Dylan, and sustainability through the prism of our individual properties. But I think the whole notion now of smart tourism is something that we really ought to be talking about, because there are roadblocks with some of the issues, some of the visited sites in Sri Lanka right now. I was in Sri Lanka last year. As Malik knows, we caught up, and the visitation issues down at Yala are not good. The visitation, if you turn up at Sigiriya at midday on a busy tourism day, you could be there for an hour and a half, and it's a very slow process. Smart tourism now enables you to use technology to just be much more focused about who's going to be there at particular times. And this is not rocket science now. There's so much technology that could be harnessed to drive much better outcomes from tourists. And while there aren't any, it's a perfect time to do it.
Yeah.
The other couple of things that I think are really important, Catherine, firstly, what was originally planned to be happening in Sri Lanka before I think about a year ago, and it was, I think it was before the terrorist attacks, and that was to establish a tourism exchange very similar to the tourism exchange that occurs in Australia. It has been such an unbelievable success to be able to bring all your buyers from each of the continents, and particularly your source and core markets, and bring them in to meet all of the sellers. A buyer simply won't have the skill sets to be able to pick up the deals and the other experiential opportunities that exist in different parts of Sri Lanka, whether it's at Oregon Bay or Trinco, whether it's up in the north at Jaffna or in the islands up there. They just won't have that information unless they actually are able to meet the sellers. And bringing together those buyers and those sellers is a critical part of success for the next 3 to 5 years, if you're looking out to 2025 and what it's going to look like. And the final one that I think is been such a critical part of Australia's success is the Aussie Specialist Program. And there is, it started 30 years ago, and so it's pretty sophisticated now in terms of the numbers of agents. I think there's 32,000 agents in 15 countries that are now Aussie specialists. And I'm not suggesting you're going to get to that quickly, but the reality is that if you are able to establish a modest program to start with, and you start accrediting agents so that they become specialists in your country, not only does it add value to their life because of the enhanced brand accreditation that they have and they can put on their website or their window in the high street, but it enables them to also sell those experiential opportunities that they simply wouldn't know about if they didn't have that exposure to the issue. So I think if I could ask the tourism authorities to do anything, it would be to really focus on those 3 areas whilst there is and as a longer term strategy, whilst we've got downtime, because when there's uptime, there just doesn't ever seem to be time to do it.
Catherine,
because they're big, long projects. Yes.
Yeah, Catherine, we're working right now with the South African government, and they're doing exactly what Andrew is saying. They said, you know, we don't have to prepare right now for ITB or WTM. We don't have to get our brochures ready. We don't have to do any of this. Let's take a look at our product development perspective. Let's try to make sure that that we have the right list of the agents and tour operators and buyers that maybe we shouldn't be talking to them, or maybe we should be talking to these ones. Let's get our house in order, and this is the best time to do it. You're obviously getting pressure from the private sector to get travelers in, but then we have the domestic market. So,
and that's a good, segue. Deal.
I've been in a few forums in Sri Lanka tourism as well, and I can remember we tried to create legislation, you know, to standardize the industries, to create safety, but it is such a frustrating process because it changes, you know, from one chairman to the next or one government to the next, and we go back to zero. I remember my colleague Wade mentioned, you know, about the whitewater rafting industry. Even before it became a scene in Sri Lanka, he said, Dale, we need to set in the system to manage these industries. If not, it's going to get overcrowded, there's going to be deaths, and we're going to bring down the quality of the product we have. People are going to compete on price. It's the same thing that happened in the South. 20 years ago, we are surfing in the South and there was hardly any operators. But now, you know, every beach is full of operators, and I have no problem with that, but they all compete on the price. And when they compete on price, there is no money saved in these areas, and there's no way for them to develop.
And the irony is, if you target the experienced traveler, they're not looking at price. It's not their consideration. Right. It's like, what's the quality of the experience, you know, that I get? It's a value proposition. What is the quality of the experience over the cost I get? And if you can give me an authentic, amazing experience, I'm going to pay for it, because it's kind of what I want to do.
There must be leadership taken, you know, at the apex body that comes up with legislation. You know, there is a lot of experience in the private sector. You know, there's a lot of people who want to visit the north, the untouched areas of Sri Lanka, the east coast in Mullaitivu, beautiful beaches. You know, why can't we get in a cross section of industry persons to, you know, come up with products, and Sri Lanka tourism also needs to then push these locations without always sticking to the same story. If we can put in Kalpitia and Mana as the top destinations for the world, you know, just a handful of us operators, you know, we've made it the top 10 in the world without any effort from government. You know, what more we can do with government support.
Yeah, so with working together. Exactly. Thank you so much. I'm very mindful of our time. I have to say that this has been and I don't want to have any disrespect to my other awesome panels and webinars that we've done so far, but this is by far my favorite because of the passion and connection to greater benefits and the long-term benefit of, you know, how experiences can work tremendously at a small level, you know, versus a large level versus the whole organization and the destination. I'd like to put Malik back onto the screen if he's there for question time. And there's a couple of really good, hello Malik, have you been enjoying it?
Fascinating, as you say, really, really good stuff.
So really grateful for the panelists. One of the questions that's come up from the audience is the domestic market. We haven't touched on it. And so the first one is really to Dill. We had the question, have you been marketing to the domestic audience pre-COVID? And also, what is the opportunity now? Because that's the next, you know, that is the opportunity now for Sri Lanka is domestic tourism.
Okay. We're very conscious about our pricing. So in our main season, we don't give discounts because this is our main bread and butter. So if the domestic market can afford the pricing, you know, they can take it. And then we have a lower season, or even post-COVID, we did slash the prices a bit. But again, it's a blanket price for our online bookings or foreigners or locals. It's all the same pricing. Because if we go too low, it doesn't make business sense for us, but it also, we are very mindful that the lower end market is not my market. There are other people who should benefit from it in the local village. But yes, we did market.
And will you be marketing now as we get out the gate with domestic? Is that a strategy for you, and how are you going to do that?
Yeah, we continue to market, you know, we continue to market our offering. We've been doing that even before also.
You keep going.
Keep
okay.
going.
Any questions, any comments from Oliver or Andrew around the domestic market opportunity and, you know, the space there in terms of thinking about the customer, because the whole discussion has been also about what does the customer want? So thinking about the domestic Sri Lankan customer now, what are the opportunities for our listeners in terms of that space? Andrew?
I guess the thing that really struck me about Dill's presentation is just how different the product is from anything else that I would know about in Sri Lanka, even domestically. I'm absolutely sure that very few people in Colombo and in other parts of the country have any sense of the diversity of rich experiences that Dill offers. And given the demographics and sociographics of Sri Lanka, there are many, many people in the domestic market who are eligible to be able to, and who financially could afford it. And I think this is a time when you really should be out there disseminating just what makes you so different and what you stand for. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so differentiating your message and your authenticity and your experiences. Awesome. Oliver, have you got anything to add on that from a domestic perspective right now for our listeners?
So Catherine, there is the business imperative for the domestic market. As much as we really want to think that the international market is going to return, and you know, we're thinking at now end of July, possibly in August, there is now increasing evidence from, you know, smart folks like Forward Keys and Oxford Economics that are looking at this as a very protracted recovery period. I think for us as an industry to say that tourism will return en masse by Q4 from an international perspective, I think is disingenuous. So I think the business imperative for Sri Lanka is we really, really need to look at the domestic market. And the great thing is that you have the population base, right? The second part of it is there is some best practice that's emerging in terms of how to look at the domestic market. Canada is one example, Australia is another, where it's this concept of love of country, right? Love of country and exploration of your own country. You know, Sri Lanka might consume Indian media or, you know, wear American blue jeans, but you've got an amazing culture and an amazing heritage. And if you're selling it to international people, why not sell it to your domestic market? So this kind of gives us the impetus to look at the domestic market from this concept of explore your own backyard, explore other regions of Sri Lanka that you might not have been to. Talk to your neighbors.
It's a really good point, because I know that often, you know, we like to, you know, think about where else we can go in the world, and there is an outbound Sri Lankan market that can no longer travel anywhere. Obviously, there is a difficulty from a financial perspective
Substitution tourism.
globally.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But,
Yeah.
you know, experiencing your own destination is an opportunity for now.
Yeah.
From that
There is a
side.
few questions around price. So, and you know, price is very sensitive, right? I think businesses that will look at this from a yield perspective, you know, you obviously want to try to get a higher yield when the international market eventually comes back. And that can be your pricing. And the tourism industry knows yield pricing, right? We give net rates to tour operators all the time, or OTAs. This might be an opportunity to just look at your books and figure out what your pricing model is in order to price effectively to the domestic market, because obviously there's a difference in price, right? If you've got the rupee or if you've got the euro. But I think this can be done at the asset level.
Fantastic. Great. I'm looking at all the other questions coming in at the moment, multitasking, and I can see that there is many people listening, Dil, that are finding your story, your attitude, and your delivery of a sustainable tourism model for 8 years incredibly amazing. And I think it's giving people hope that perhaps are interested in entering this space. One of the questions we had is, you know, tips to, if we're already in the space of offering, we're a homestay, or we're a, you know, an accommodation provider, or we're doing one thing, you know, overhead low at the moment, we're challenged on cash flow. How do we value add experiences into offerings right at this moment? From little things, big things grow kind of concept, because you didn't start out big.
No, I would just go outside. I mean, how I experienced and came up with products was that I went outside, I spoke to people, you know, I explored for myself. We have to be in the shoes of the tourist itself. And through that, you will see opportunities. A simple example is that, you know, cycling, you know, we got the guys who come from Colombo now, they love to cycle. And then I said, I know an amazing route because I go jogging through a village. And I said, you can look at this, you can look at this, you can see the guys tending their fields, or you can just go for a jog on the beach and you will see the different type of fishermen. You know, there are simple things that are unique for the tourists who, you know, they have never seen things like this. And also you capitalize, if you're a homestay and you're in a village, capitalize on the fact that Sri Lankans are very hospitable. They love to talk and love to share their stories. And little things like this is how you build this bond with your guest and build a bond with your communities. The guy might be selling you know, coconut oil, for instance, and we'll tell our guests, maybe you can buy some coconut oil straight from the vendor himself. You know, simple things like that, you know, go a long way in that experience for the tourists, and it builds, you know, a bond with them.
It's funny because I agree. One of my most amazing experiences was in the East in Batacola at a homestay. So Marla's homestay, so very small operator, but what she was doing to differentiate herself was cooking. So she took her guests to do shopping at the local market, and then she taught people how to cook the meals with her. Now her TripAdvisor reviews through what she did went through the roof, because it's not just a bed, it's an experience. And it's that sort of little example that's no infrastructure overhead cost for someone to start doing that. That's just an opportunity that was connected to what a skill was for her already.
Yeah, post-COVID, I think the SMEs might think that they're in the toughest situation, but I feel, I mean, if the playing field is level for all of us, you know, when tourism opens, I think the SME sector can actually bounce back much faster than the high-end hotels, because their overheads are low, and there are guests who are willing to come to their accommodation and their experiences. So again, I stress, please make the playing field level for all of us when we open up the industry in August.
I think it's also going to be easier for social distancing, Bill, for smaller properties, because larger properties are going to really struggle, particularly in central areas, lobbies, restaurants and so on. Whereas at least small SMEs have got the ability to spread out, because there really are only a few folk.
Correct. Yes.
And I think the other point I think you're raising there about space is that, you know, the post-COVID traveller is looking for space, you know, space, whether it's, you know, nature and wildlife, whether they're looking for regional areas that, you know, are perhaps less well known. So the opportunities are there. It's about how to take them. Look, I'm really mindful of our time. We've kind of hit our limit. I would like to say thank you for the privilege of facilitating what has been an absolute highlight for me, and all of your valuable insights. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Malik, I'll pass over to you to wrap up.
Thank you. It really has been a really fascinating discussion. I've shared the Facebook link on the chat, so I would urge all those who are watching to please share it on your personal channels. Many of you have found it very, very rewarding, so please do that to get the message out. The point Dill made about a level playing field, as far as I know, when tourism opens, all registered businesses will have an equal opportunity. There's obviously is going to be a certification process, but everyone will have an equal opportunity. And also be mindful that when countries open up, many countries are, you know, just playing around. They're not sure, you know, things keep changing. So some of the requirements in terms of testing, PCR may appear to be onerous, but near the time, I'm sure it'll get resolved and simplified, because obviously the health authorities are playing very, very safe, since Sri Lanka has handled the crisis pretty well, with just 11 deaths. So, you know, the next discussion we're hoping to have is around the logistics, the concerns about opening, how the process will work, in our view, and we'll have some interesting panelists on for that, because obviously we're all looking at complications relating to the August 1 opening. But the fact that Sri Lanka has announced a date has been picked up very well, because it sends a very strong message to customers who may be booking holidays for later on, that the country is safe and the country is opening. So our next session in 2 weeks from now will focus on that. Details will follow. You know, as I said, I've really been fascinated by the discussion, and the innovation, Dale, that you've shown is an example to all of us how we can essentially go off the beaten track and literally create these new high value experiences, which are not to be confused with high end. There's a debate going on about high end. I don't think high end is the model that we should aspire for the whole country, but high yield, longer stays, high value, integrating with the country, going off the beaten track, innovative experience, and repeat clientele, because, you know, the best experiences have people coming back every year, like the euros, 80,000 euros that you've collected. Now, if that could happen to more businesses, and hopefully those watching would get inspired, you know, we would automatically reposition tourism. In wrapping up, there is one new development I want to talk about, which is our push for local tourism. So on lovesrilanka.org, which is our Sri Lanka Tourism Alliance is a trade site, lovesrilanka.org is our consumer site, and we've been doing a lot of work pushing the message out globally. We're starting a campaign where we will feature all our members, their local offerings will be featured. We'll be pushing it on the social. So in response to some of the questions, Dale, where a lot of people were not aware of your product, member of the Alliance who's got a local offer will be featured on the lovesrilanka.org, and that will be pushed very aggressively on AdWords as well as social media. So we'll share all that information with all of the members. I think that's it from me. So those watching, if you haven't joined the Alliance already, please do. It's free. It's available to companies as well as individuals. And I'd just like to thank all of you for a really, really fascinating discussion. We can have a lot more views over the weekend, as we usually do. Thank you so very much for all of your contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.